Bottom line is we're human. We're none of us are perfect, and none of us believe the same thing, and we don't have to. But ultimately, like, to try to do best by our kids, just be engaged and just love them no matter what, you know? Hey, what's up, guys? It's Morgan with My Spiritual Life, and today I have some awesome guests, Crystal and Sean Escobar. Thank you so much for being here. Some of my very favorite apostates.
Thank you.
So Crystal, do you want to tell us just a little bit about you guys and where people can find you? Because you've got some awesome stuff going on, and I want people to go check it out.
Okay. Yes. Well, Sean and I have been out of the church for about 2 years now, and I have always had this blog, this mom blog, and it was more of like a LDS mom's blog. You know, I would talk about, I was really focused on, LDS moms, and I've had that for the past 10 years. And a few years ago, I started up a podcast to go along with all the different topics that I would discuss on my blog. And so it just transformed into a podcast. But then little did I know that 20 episodes in, I would be choosing to leave the church. And so I took like a couple months break once we had like made this decision. And at episode 21, I broke the news to my whole audience and told them that we were leaving the church. And then at that point, I think I was like, okay, I'm going to just mention it once, and then I'll go on to podcast about all the different topics that I did before, more about like personal development for moms. And I found that I couldn't do it. I could not talk about my journey out of the church. Like, there were so many things that I was unpacking. And so the podcast transformed into the Mormon. It was a wannabe balanced podcast, and it transformed into the Mormon Enlightenment podcast hosted by Wannabe Balanced. And it's every week we've just been kind of documenting our journey over the past couple of years, sharing different insights, struggles, things that we have been learning over the course of these last 2 years out of the church. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing. And then we started up the Mormon Enlightenment Facebook group. Was that 2 years ago, too? It was soon after we left. Yeah, we were just out.
It's almost 2 years ago.
Yeah. So it's almost at 5,000 members now, and it's such a great community of people that we love to just chime in and connect and find friends and like-minded people who are going through some of the same emotions. And, there's so many different things that you go through as you transition out. So it's nice to have a community of people that you can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yes. So I have to say, like, to everyone watching, that I love Crystal and Sean's podcast. I've listened to several episodes, and Crystal has she touches my heart so deeply when she talks about the way you describe your struggle. And I always love Sean's perspective because he has such a different view of the world than I feel like I ever did when I was Mormon. And it's so refreshing to hear. So I love your guys' podcast. Definitely check out the Mormon Light podcast. And I love the Facebook group. That was like my home, like when I left the church. So I always highly recommend people joining that Facebook group. It's awesome. It's very supportive. And I love going and even posting questions in there, and people they will love bomb you with answers. You will get like hundreds of comments sometimes.
Yeah.
You will get bombarded with love and help, and it's just so awesome. So yay. So definitely check out Sean and Crystal stuff. We'll have all the links below in the description. And today we are going to be talking about parenting after Mormonism. What do we call that? Ex-mormon parenting or something like that. And I'm super excited to have Sean and Crystal they're just going to be talking about their experience, their struggles after leaving the church and parenting. And they've got kids in various ages. Your oldest is a teenager, right? And how old's the oldest and youngest?
Our oldest is 14 and our youngest is 6.
Right. So when you guys left, it was 12 and 2. Yeah. And so kind of all the ranges there. And so I'm excited to kind of hear your different perspectives and how the different kids handled it, and so I'm just going to turn this over to you guys and just if you want to start wherever you want to start, but if you want to help paint the picture for us of what was it like, initially leaving the church and then all of a sudden, oh, and I'm a mom or dad, and I somehow have to figure this out. I'd love to hear any thoughts.
Yeah, I'll give a little backstory of what it was like for our kids, and then maybe you can share some of the things that we've kind of changed as far as our parenting style goes, because a lot has changed, but it hasn't been easy to figure this out. Like, it's been a lot of struggle. So we are by no means like experts at this whole parenting after Mormonism. We're still very much trying to figure it out. But I did want to share briefly what it was like for the transition for our kids, because I was always interested in hearing other people's stories and like, how was that for the kids? And I think I also just needed to hear like hope that everything would be okay for the ones that, for us, we just had one that it was hard for. And in the beginning, it was so stressful for us. And I had so much panic and worry that we were messing up her life, like really badly. And I was worried that, what's it going to look like with her friends? Like, are the parents of her friends going to start judging her and us and being like, let's not allow our kids to hang out with her? And so there's all these different like fears that come into your mind. And then especially, my daughter was just going into Young Women's, and she had just gone to her first girls camp. And when she came home while she was at girls camp, we had made it official, like, all right, we are officially leaving the church. We're removing our names. We are not going to go back, and we are not going to allow our kids to go back. And we can go into that a little bit more of why we've decided to not give them a choice. But it was really hard for my daughter, because you know what it's like when you first get into Young Women's. It's just so exciting. You feel all grown up, and they make it so fun, like with the girls camp and all that. And so it was really hard for her, and that was really hard for me to see how angry she was at us. And I just remember feeling hopeless, like, and wishing that if only we had left 2 or 3 years earlier, sooner, then she wouldn't feel this way, because she never really loved church, and she was never the type that would be like reading her scriptures on her own or saying her prayers. Like, she was never
a social thing,
got into it. So I knew it was not about her testimony or just destroying her whole worldview. I knew it was not necessarily about that. It was more so not wanting to be different, and not getting to go to certain things that her other friends were going to. So that was hard. But, I think it took about a year for us to see, like, oh my gosh, she's finally starting to understand like where we're coming from, because she was just mad at us. She thought we were crazy. And then after a year of slowly trying to give her information without, bombarding her with all of it, because at first I wanted to be like, come on, you got to learn all of it. You got to know everything about Joseph Smith. You got to know everything about the church, like, and all the reasons why we have left. I wanted her to know, because I felt so judged by her, and it was really hard. But then she's definitely come around, and it's 2 years now, and she has totally, like, she totally understands, and she's actually grateful. And we have a lot of conversations with her where I feel like she is on the same page. And I never would have imagined that she would be here. I thought, oh, great, we're just going to have to accept that we've ruined our relationship with Lily, and we're just going to have the 3 younger ones that will love us.
Oh, no.
It's too late. It's ruined. And so now it's nice to see that, like, we've got a good relationship with her, and she understands where we're coming from, and she doesn't think we're crazy anymore.
Good. Well, and I'll just say something real quick. And Crystal, I just love how honest and open you are about these things, because that's more helpful than anything else. Like, it's just other people hearing like that fear, and they're not the only one that feels that way, that they like that fear of like, are we going to have this relationship with her? Like, is this going to ruin things forever? Like that's such a real thing. I totally feel for you in that. And like, yeah. So Sean, what were your
Parenting never stops. My
Yeah,
son is blowing us up.
texting.
oh, no problem.
Yeah,
If we need
sorry.
to pause or something, you just
No,
let
we're
me know.
good. We're good.
Okay.
Well, I wanted Sean to explain like
Yeah,
why
you're
we
kind of
decided to not give our kids a choice. You know, because I know some
Yeah.
people have this. You know, they want to allow their kids to make their own choice when it comes to you know
totally.
beliefs and a religion and all that. But we want to. I want Sean to explain why we felt so adamant about not giving them that choice.
Yeah, and
at
also
the
Sean,
point that they're at.
and also share your kind of initial thoughts about how things were going with your daughter, because you were kind of more driving this train of like, I don't want to be a part of this church, I think, kind of more so than Crystal was at first.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, how did that impact like the way that you saw her reacting, and were you concerned? And so yeah, all of that stuff. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think what happened initially was I started to feel all the trauma that the Mormon church had brought into my life,
Right.
all the way back to my teen years when I had to go to the bishop and had to confess things. And I remembered feeling very much flawed. I remember when I'd go to the bishop and I would share my transgressions. And I was always like really honest. For the most part, I just spilled the beans. Like I felt like, this is the only way that I could get right with God. So I would confess things.
Yeah.
And then I started to feel like, I'm paying such a heavy price for being honest. And it was causing me so much shame and so much guilt. And I felt all the time like I was at odds. I was deficient. I almost felt like I wasn't meant to be a good person. I started to feel like other people were naturally good and that I was inherently bad because I kept succumbing to these temptations. And so that, coupled with, I actually made a list, and I was just looking for it on my phone a moment ago because I said to myself, I need to weigh the pros and the cons. And I made a list of all the reasons that I couldn't allow my children to keep going to the Mormon church, even if I wasn't going to go.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like kind of a hardline thing, like I'm not going anymore. I told my wife, I said, if it's not true, then to me being a very literal person, if it's not true, then it's fraud. It's really bad fraud.
Yeah.
And so therefore I can't go. I can't support that. And I know everybody, has nuanced ways of viewing that, and that's up to them individually. But for me, it was just very black and white that way. And so I started to weigh the pros. There's community. There's supposed to be good morals, good values, and so forth. But then I weighed the cons, and it was things like gender inequality. Like my daughters, like I don't want them growing up in that environment where there is absolutely gender inequality. And do I want them to suffer from the shame and the guilt? The so-called what's that they call it, culture, something culture, clean culture, or there's a word for it,
Right.
where you're supposed to be so squeaky
Purity
clean.
culture.
Purity
Oh,
culture.
yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Do I want them to fall victim to that purity culture? Do I want them to live in that framework? And then it was like, we learn intolerance. We learn condescension. We actually do think we're better than other people. And then it came down to things like, do I want them in bishops, interviews? Do I want them glorifying men? Like, that was one of the hardest things for me, because I knew that based on my track record, I knew I'd never have a real meaningful calling. So I knew my children would always be glorifying other men and not their own father. Their own father wouldn't be one of the spiritual ones. He wouldn't be one of the ones that was close to God. He would always be like this scarred, diminished figure. Whereas, the bishop and the bishopric and the stake president, these will all be these like glorified spiritual men, way better than my dad, So there were so many things, and I weighed them.
Yeah.
And I just told Crystal, like, there's no way, like, I can't, I can't do that. I can't allow my kids to go on missions, for instance. Now, you can take a very subjective, nuanced approach to that. But for me, it's like, why would I, if it's not literally true, Why would I essentially raise my children to leave me? Why would I raise my children to get married where I can't attend? It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that because I super love what you're saying. And like, that's what I love about talking with you guys so much. Is you guys are just so real and raw about these real things, you know? And because I know there's varying opinions out there about, you know, okay, if you leave and you have a teenage child, do you let them go or not? Or even younger if they want to go. And, you know, it's one of those things where every family has to decide for themselves what's best. But I super resonate with what Sean is saying because I can only imagine how hard that would be to send your children to a church that's going to basically bash on you.
Yeah.
And again, not trying to diss on, you know, it's like, it's not intentional or whatever, but it's like, how can you, like you said, send your kids to this church that are seeing, oh, my dad isn't a godly man or whatever, and like that's got to be so hard as a parent to make that kind of decision. And I just think it totally makes sense, like everything you're saying, 'cause
And
that's so hard.
the missionary work that goes on. You know, they see a kid coming to church without their parents, you know, they're going to hone in on them and be like, how can we help her be a missionary to the parents? And so we didn't want that confusion going on in her mind, or her to be taught that, okay, now you are going to be the one that brings them back. So in her mind, she's thinking that we are lost and that we are the crazy ones. And she'll be like, you know, like feeling like, oh, it's up to me to bring them back, you know. And so we just didn't want that confusion. And
it's so passive aggressive. They act like your children are always welcome and we will always love you and we do not judge you, but their doctrine is like the most offensive thing you could ever do to another human being is to damn them.
Yeah.
What more could you do to someone? You're eternally damned because you don't believe what we believe anymore. That's grossly offensive. I don't know how they get away with it, but they do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I totally hear what you're saying. So it's like, how do you leverage that? Like, you know, they're saying one thing, but the doctrine's teaching another thing. And yeah, that's just really hard. Like I know a friend of mine, her husband had left the church and at first she was still in, and one of her struggles was like, I don't want my kids going to this church where they're taught their dad is a bad guy, you know? And again, it's not always like intentional, but it's like, it's the attitude that comes through. And like you said, can be very confusing for a young child and can cause a lot of separation in the family. It's just unfortunate, the situation that it creates. I wish that being a nuanced Mormon was more acceptable, but it's kind of just one of those things where it's like when you're Mormon, it's kind of like you're all in, you know. It's kind of the vibe that they breed, you know what I mean? It's not like Catholic where it's like you can go if you want to, and you know, and even Catholicism, you know, it depends on the area you live and stuff too, but it's more common to have more nuanced members than it is with Mormonism. But anyway.
Yeah, I would say that nuanced Mormons, as I've become more and more familiar with that, nuanced Mormons are just hiding Mormons. They're shadow Mormons. They don't do those things openly and in the face of other Mormons. They just do it in their own homes with their doors closed and their windows shut and their shutters closed, and they do what they want, and then, you know, they claim it works for them. Well, if hiding works for people, that's great. That never worked for us. We either, you know, are going to live it and do it, or we're not. And that was kind of the deciding factor. We can't just half-ass anything.
I totally respect that. And so it's just so people watching who understand what nuanced Mormons mean, if they're not Mormon, what we're saying in that is that they're practicing Mormons, but they don't fully believe all of the doctrine. So they kind of have this easy breezier attitude of like, oh, you know, if someone's drinking coffee, oh, you know, whatever. And it's just not very common to find those. Now, I think they're becoming more common. But the unfortunate truth is that for the most part, like you said, it's not socially acceptable to be a nuanced Mormon. And if you say things in Relief Society, in church worship regarding your nuanced opinions, you'll kind of get torn down, you know. It's not appreciated to have that kind of attitude, because there's very much a black and white kind of view as far as how you're supposed to teach and how you're supposed to be.
They're morphing, Morgan, they're morphing. Like one of our friends just said that the Relief Society has become much more accepting. The lessons have become much more progressive. So it's morphing. Like the Mormon Church, they know what they're doing from the top down. They're morphing into they're trying to appear as though they're just some form of Christianity. If someone told me yesterday, they said remove polygamy and remove the patriarchy, and all you have the Baptist Church. They're not that different to begin with.
Yeah.
So now they're just going mainstream, and everybody will act as though, you know what? In reality, I predicted that Mormonism would go away 2 years ago, and now I would predict that it's not going to go away. It's already gone.
That's funny.
They just morph. They just change, and they just they're like chameleon effect, and they just change to what the society is demanding of them. And it's going to be around, but the forefathers of Mormonism that were very orthodox and very literal, they would roll over in their graves if they saw what Mormonism is today.
It's true. And honestly, we're very lucky that this is not Brigham Young's church anymore, right? Like, it's a much better church now. So in a way, it's a good thing that
that's true.
It's so influenced by society changing. It's just ironic because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, wait, if it's God's true church, it shouldn't change. So it's dicey.
You know what I wanted to tell you about my daughter Lily. This is one of the things that I really feel passionate about. Everybody, confirmation bias, it's always within us. And so people, when they're in the church, they have all of this confirmation bias around, this is the best way to raise children. My children have, a prophet. My children have apostles. My children have a bishop and local leaders and young women's leaders. And they have this, it's almost like they have this, how would you say that, it's condescension. It's like, we've got this figured out. And Mormons, I found, we do the same thing post-Mormonism. Post-Mormonism, I've heard people say, wow, you left Mormonism. That is the greatest gift you could ever give your child. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a very biased thing to say. Right. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. In 2 years, in our 2-year anniversary of leaving the church was literally like last Friday. But I've learned that post-Mormonism can be unbelievably hard on children in so many ways. And one of the things that I've noticed the most is that parents, due to the suppression of the Mormon church, due to all of that they feel like they missed out on, they become very selfish. They become very motivated by their own self-interests. And a lot of them start to have all kinds of midlife crisis flaring up. And they start to behave in such a way that, like, I see things that I would swear they're back in college. If not their senior year in high school, because it all becomes about them. It all becomes about the next party. It all becomes about the next drinking event, the next trip. And, I'm kind of, I just want to inspire people to do the right thing by your children. It's hard enough that you've put them through this faith crisis and this faith transition and, mixed them up that way. My hope was that my daughter would say about my wife and I that, they have become better people since leaving the Mormon church, and they have become better parents.
Better parents,
and they are more kind, and they are more generous, and they are more tolerant. That's my sincere hope. And I think keeping that in mind could be an incredible opportunity in terms of a barometer of how we're doing.
I think that's so beautiful. I love that, because it's about progression and improvement more than it is about what we believe in the end. You know what I mean? Because you can be a really awesome parent and be Mormon. You can be a really awesome parent and be ex-Mormon, whatever. Ultimately, being a parent is really hard. And it's hard to navigate, and it's even harder to navigate when you go through this transition. So I think that's really cool what you're saying is like, do right by your kids. Like, if nothing else, try to do right by your kids. I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it is definitely a hard balance to find when it comes to not shaming your kids, not trying to control your kids. The way that our parenting style as Mormons was more about shame and guilt and control. And so it's hard because I feel like, like life is like a pendulum, like we're going way extreme over here. And this is how we were as Mormons with the control and the shame. But then we accidentally, we go way over here and we're like, this isn't working. This is too much. Like, they're just getting into trouble and they're going, like, we can't be like no control. And we got to have some morals and values in place. So it's just a matter of time where we kind of like come back down and then we find this balance. But we've definitely gone from the whole other side of the pendulum and thinking that, okay, now we're going to make sure that we just don't control them and we allow them to be free. But then we're like, that's not working. Oh, okay.
Yes.
So I think it's just trying to figure out where that balance is,
Yes, I love that. And it's so interesting because as parents too, it's like we see what our parents did wrong to us. And then sometimes, like you said, we want to do the opposite of that so much that we go so extreme that it's a problem on the other end,
Yeah.
Like, so I love that you said that, because it's like, okay, you have to play it out and you have to see what works and you have to find that balance, because there is this, like, you got to give your kids a healthy dose of boundaries and freedom, because it's the freedom that allows them to build trust in themselves, and it's the boundaries that keep them from going overboard, and learn respecting themselves, perhaps, is the flip side of that. But I love that. So Sean had to drop off here for a minute because he is a parent and has to do parenting things.
Yeah.
But we are just going to keep going. So Crystal, I wanted to know, as far as you talked a little about Lily and her reaction and kind of how that worked itself out. What about your other kids? Like, were you worried about them? Did they react negatively? Tell us, like, at those different ages, kind of how that played out.
Okay. No, actually the other ones were great. It was only my oldest daughter that had such a hard time with it. But our other daughter, she turned 8 this year, and she never even mentioned anything about baptism, but it was a weird thing for me. And just to kind of think, okay, my oldest 2 have been baptized. Of course, our names are no longer on the list anyway, on the church membership anyway. So we'd all have to get rebaptized if we ever wanted to, So, so Brooklyn, our 8-year-old, it was just kind of interesting for me to just be aware that, she's 8 and she's not getting baptized. It was not sad. It was just kind of like, But yeah, it has not been difficult for any of my other kids. Like, they love that we don't have to go to church. That's the only thing that they noticed that has changed. I think the only hard part for me sometimes is because I used to always say, like if they had bad dreams and stuff, I used to always use Jesus or Heavenly Father. And now I'm just confused in that area, so I just don't even say it anymore. But like the other day I was trying to help Owen and Brooklyn. They were scared about something, and I was like trying to help them have good dreams, and like usually I would talk about Jesus or Heavenly Father, but I was like, I guess we'll just talk about Santa Claus, because I loved Santa Claus, and like or guardian angels. I was thinking about angels and fairies and all these good things, so I was just bringing in different things. But I think with Heavenly Father, first of all, I don't like saying Heavenly Father. It always sounded so cheesy to me. I will still use God, but I still am afraid of using the word God for my kids, because I just want them to have an open mind about that. So I don't want to use the name God a lot in my conversations or teachings with them, but
God is just so male.
Yeah.
Right.
So I just bring in anything else that always made me feel good as a kid, and but yeah, that's the only thing that's been a little different for me, to not say Jesus. Not that I'm against Jesus at all, but I'm
But it's
still
like, I
confused
don't.
about all that. So I'm just not going to use those words until I feel like I have more of my own clarity. But still, even then, I don't think I would want to use those words, because I just want it to be more open-minded about all of it,
Yeah, I totally understand. And that's such a hard thing where it's like, okay, I used to have this one way that I could comfort them and make everything okay. And it's like, I don't know what to say. Like, someone comfort me. I don't know.
Or like, yeah, with the prayers, like we'd be like, let's say a prayer,
Yeah.
Time to help you have good
Like,
dreams.
if you think about this aspect, like, what feels better, to teach your children that they were born perfectly imperfect, that they're equipped with everything they need to be successful in life, and that they have value, and they have they're whole, they're complete, or to teach your children that they were born into this fallen state because of their stupid ancestors that blew it. Jesus becomes, I know most everybody subscribes to Jesus and loves Jesus, but to me, if you subscribe to the story of Jesus, then you also subscribe to the fact that the ideology that your children are born flawed, and you have to teach them that religions have preyed upon that since the beginning of religion. They've preyed on the fact that people feel incomplete.
Yeah, the sins and the punishment way of teaching, like, we want that to be far from anything that we teach our kids. And that's why Jesus is still a sensitive topic, because Jesus to
Because
us,
it was used with a
means.
lot of manipulation.
Yeah.
Think about the manipulation. My sex abuser, when I met with him and interviewed him, he threw out the Jesus card at me.
Right.
He threw out the atonement. He tried to use that to his own benefit so that I would just forgive him. When he was imprisoned and put in handcuffs and led away, he turned around. His final statement to his family was, "I just wish my family would be more like Jesus." It's all manipulation as far as I'm concerned. So
that's weird.
I don't see the need for that kind of stuff. I prayed to, like, if we're talking about that element of things, I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed till I was blue in the face for 25 years. And I never felt like anybody was actually listening, if I'm being truthfully honest. Doesn't mean I'm an atheist. Doesn't mean I'm, anything, just that I'm just being completely candid and brutally honest. Now, did things happen where, I said a little prayer and I found my keys? Yes, but that's happening to me today. It happens all the time. Serendipitous things happen to me all the time, and I don't even have the Holy Ghost anymore.
Well, I totally respect that. And like, I just, I have to get on my soapbox for a second, because I feel like I see a lot of people in the ex-Mormon community that talk about, like, well, why did you have to leave Jesus when you left whatever? And I'm like, honestly, I don't blame anyone who doesn't know what the heck to believe after they leave, because it's so confusing. You have the Holy Ghost telling you that the Book of Mormon is true, and you have the Holy Ghost telling you that Jesus loves you. And when one of those doesn't equate, then how can you still hold up the other view? It's really hard. And again, not trying to diss on anyone who loves Jesus. Like, I don't have a problem with Jesus. Like, I think I believe God. I want to believe in God, but I'm very much like, I don't know. And I totally have so much sympathy for anyone who doesn't know how to handle the belief system after they leave, because it feels like there's no credibility for beliefs anymore. It's hard.
Yeah, so like Crystal and I talk about this a lot. We kind of have this formula where when we're talking about our children or beliefs or Crystal's beliefs or my beliefs, we ask ourselves, is it hurting anyone? Is it hurting you potentially, or is it hurting anyone? If it passes that, then we ask it, does it glorify any human being? Does it glorify any man or woman? Then we move on to, does it require your money? And if so, how much of it and for what reason? You see? And then, there's another one, which is, does it require you to go out and solicit others to have the same belief?
Yeah.
Does it require you to essentially be a missionary? If it doesn't pass that test, we throw it out.
Yeah.
And these Jesus thumpers, I mean, holy crap. If anybody's been intolerant to me, the most blatantly intolerant towards me, it's been the evangelical Christians that are Jesus thumpers that have come after me because, oh, you're not Mormon? Well, you better believe what I believe, because otherwise you're going to hell.
Yeah.
And it's that heavy. Like, they come after me, like formally call me and say, hey, I've had it happen probably 4 or 5 different times.
And I had it happen a couple times too. And
I've had it happen.
I feel like they're so it's so fear-based, because they feel so inclined to tell us about Christ and that we can't deny Christ, because they're afraid of what's going to happen to us if we don't accept Christ. And we're like, we just want to be away. We want to step away from anything that feels like fear and like this urgency, like, oh my gosh, we better accept Christ, or else, like, what's going to happen to us when he comes again, or when we die, or, like, I don't feel that is useful for us in our lives right now. Like, it does not empower me. It doesn't inspire me. It just makes me afraid.
Yes, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you guys being just super honest about this, because like your opinions are totally valid, and it can feel very disingenuous when you get people like, oh, you left the Mormon Jesus, now we can get you to the real Jesus. And I understand, like, if you love Jesus and you're a big Jesus fan and stuff, that's super awesome. But you got to understand too that like, that way of teaching it's hard for certain people to swallow, and that if Jesus is real, if God is real, that they are very understanding of us in our situation, because we've had Jesus kind of taught in a different light and kind of made fear around. So I think this was not a planned conversation, but needed.
I was thinking of some of the good things that have come from leaving the Mormon church in terms of our teaching of our children. Like, there's all kinds of case in points I could give you, but like yesterday, my son had painted his nails pink, and he was just having fun with that. And then one of his friends, upon seeing his nails, had said, like, whoa, like, what is that? Are you gay? And then my son was like, and he said it with a kind of a derogatory tone, like, oh, what, are you gay? And my son was like, what would be wrong with that if I was?
Proud moment. I love
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, my son's only 11, but there's all kinds of things like that. If we're talking about the shift that's taken place inside the minds of my children, our children, our children have shifted a lot in a lot of different ways. They've become far more tolerant. They've become my son and my daughter always point out when certain things about Mormonism stink to high hell, or certain behaviors of their Mormon friends' parents. Right. They'll call out that behavior. They'll say, "Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what so and so did," or they'll identify the shame and the guilt and the suppression that their friends are suffering from. And I know that they're grateful that they don't suffer from that, that same kinds of things. I think that it can be such a great thing, as long as the trick to good parenting is not whether you're Mormon or not Mormon, or religious or not religious. I think the key to good parenting is to be actively engaged and involved in your children's life. That's where good children are born. That's where they come from.
Lots of conversations. I love having open conversations with our kids and seeing their minds turning, and the way Oliver thinks. I just feel so proud. Like, some of the things that he comes up with, I'm like, I love that. Like, what was the movie he was watching?
He was watching Home.
They watched Home again the other night, and we watched that years ago as Mormons, and he was making all these connections to how that was like the church. And it was like, oh my gosh, I love that he, at 11 years old, can see the connections to the way that movie played out was very similar to the way the church controls people and all that. So I love that on his own, he was able to make that connection. And I was like, I want to watch that movie now. I haven't watched it since we've left the church. You know?
Right. That's so cool. Well, it sounds like this experience, like even though it's had rocky moments, especially for your oldest, like that it's created just a lot of awareness for them about shame and guilt culture, and that they can see it for what it is and call it out. And that's so awesome, because the more awareness they have, like the more they can, you know, kind of fix the problems in their own life too, as they grow older and realize, oh, I don't want to think that way or whatever. Like, that's so awesome. And I love what Sean said about, it's about being engaged. That's what it is to be a good parent. Like that. And that resonates with me so deeply, because the bottom line is we're human. We're none of us are perfect, and none of us believe the same thing, and we don't have to. But ultimately, like, to try to do best by our kids, just be engaged and just love them no matter what, you know? And that's like, that's all it is. And in that sense, you can kind of let go of the stress of trying to figure it out. I remember I was reading Brene Brown's Daring Greatly book, and I think this is where the quote was from, but she basically said, like, we think when we become a parent, we have to have it all figured out. And like, so that we can pass down the perfect understanding of life and meaning and everything to our kids. And that's just not how it works. And she said, so cool. She said, basically in her book, she said that it's not about handing them this perfect thing. It's about learning and taking them on that journey of learning with you. And that was one of the things that touched me the deepest as I was leaving the church, because I was leaving the church at the same time my first son was born, my only son so far. And I just kept thinking, like, I'm letting him down if I don't have all the answers, you know? But then it was like, oh no, like, we can go on this journey together. We can learn together. We can figure this out together. And how more powerful is it to say to your kid, I don't know what the answer is. Let's try to figure it out together, rather than saying the answer is A, B, C, and you can't deter from that. You know what I mean?
I love that so much, because I did, like I said, I was so frustrated in the beginning that we hadn't come to this conclusion like 2 or 3 years earlier. And because I hated so badly what it was doing to our oldest. But I love that perspective, because now I can just look at it as such a gift that she got to experience that with us in such a real way, you know, where it really affected her, and we could navigate that all together. And for her to have that life lesson, like, I'm now seeing the gift in that. For a long time, I was so upset at the church. I was so upset for so many reasons, but I love that we got to experience that with her at the age that she was. And as hard as it was for her, and for her to see how hard it was for us, like, I think that's such a gift for her, you know? Yeah. Now I can see that, instead of have so much anger towards the church, thinking like, gosh, if only I would have never joined the church, or, you know, all these things. That we think, if only I would have not had this crap in my life, you know? But there's so many gifts in the whole entire process.
There is. And even like you said, in that regret of like, it's so easy to feel that way. Well, if only I had done this, or if only this had happened, or if only, and it's like, you know what, there's even a beautiful gift in regret, right? Because the gift in regret is not wasting another minute of your life. And like, and that's the one of the biggest beautiful gifts of the faith crisis, is that it creates this awareness and this ability to really think about what you really want, instead of just going through the motions. And so that gift of regret is, okay, I'm going to live life for me. I'm going to make it mean something, and I'm going to enjoy every second of it. And so, yeah, I totally feel you with that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
better and better, really. I mean, the issues that you face post-Mormonism are not exclusive to post-Mormonism. Like, we face all the same issues as all parents, and all children are going to be faced with all the same pitfalls, you know, as Mormons, as not Mormons. You know what I mean? I think we get into these labels a lot. Mormons, post-Mormons. It's like, Crystal said to me the other day, she said something about, well, there's not a lot of evidences in our immediate sphere of influence of post-Mormons who are thriving. So therefore, our daughter does not, in her sphere of influence, she's not seeing a lot of post-Mormons who, in her opinion or from her viewpoint, would be classified as thriving.
Yeah.
And I says, well, I just don't think that's a fair designation. I don't, because that's like saying, show me how many Mormons are thriving. I know most Mormons are jacked up and phony as hell. So, show me non-Mormons who are thriving, and you'll find a lot of them. But I think it's better to classify ex-Mormons, post-Mormons as not Mormons and put us in the same pool as everybody else that's not Mormon. Mm-hmm. I think that's far more fair in my opinion, in terms of looking at the evidence. Life's hard and we're all getting our ass kicked, every one of us. And so parenting is so hard. It's the most unbelievably hard thing. Right now, I just got a text from my daughter. She's 14. Okay, here we go. Can we go to Hope Chest? Elle and I are going to walk there. I said, what is that? It's right by Albertsons. It's a thrift store. No, you don't get to go roam. No roaming. We aren't roaming. We have a destination. No. I said, then get a ride and have an adult with you. It's right up the street. I thought we all were allowed to go. Nope, not a chance. Mom lets us go to Dutch Bros. So anyway, it's like it's nonstop all day, every day. Whether you're Mormon or not, parenting is a real bear. I mean, it's hard. Parenting will kick your ass.
Yes. And I think, I love what the conclusion we're kind of coming to here is that it's just, it isn't about being Mormon or ex-Mormon. Like, there's specific struggles you face as an ex-Mormon parent, but ultimately parenting is hard. And it's especially hard when you have gone through this transition or in the middle of it, right? Because then you have that added pressure of like, I got to make my family look perfect, or else my family's going to think that our family problems are because we left the church. Like, did you guys ever feel like that?
Oh yeah, totally. That's I know a big concern for a lot of people. Like, oh great, now I got to have even more pressure to be perfect and have it all together. Otherwise, they're gonna blame it on the fact that we've left the church. And I hate that, because it's like, if we all just realize that life is hard no matter what, parenting is hard no matter what, and it does not, it's like they forget that as a Mormon, or they are struggling, everybody struggles in the church too. So it's like they just forget that everybody just struggles no matter what. And there's a lot of pressure.
Like it's a false notion. Like let's talk one topic, sex. It's a false notion to believe that Mormon kids get into sex because they're told not to. Some rebel, some. But there's also kids that if you just are totally liberal and, like totally out there in terms of, hey, I'm going to teach them everything about sex from the time they're 10 years old on, and that's what's going to prevent them from being hypersexual. That's not necessarily true. The same personality that's going to get way into sex as a Mormon is going to get way into sex as a non-Mormon. It's more of a behavior and a personality thing. It's more about their shell, what they are made up of. The only difference is they're not going to live with all that guilt and shame. But in terms of parenting, if you don't do a good job in having the right parameters around sex, a post-Mormon kid could get into all kinds of problems, big problems.
I agree mostly until, there's the suppression leads to obsession part. So, suppressing it can also make it worse, more than what it would have been.
It can make you fixate on it. I hear what you're saying.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But a sexual person is going to be sexual as a Mormon, and they're going to feel guilt and shame all the time. And they're going to be sexual as a post-Mormon. And so the parenting, the parenting still has to exist. You've got to have structure. You've got to have parameters. You've got to have discipline. You've got to have consequence. It all still exists. It has to. Get rid of all of it, you're going to have problems.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So yeah, I totally hear you. So if you could give advice to people who are like just fresh out of the church and they're trying to navigate what to do with their kids, like what would you say to them? And you've given some great stuff, but anything else?
Do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I think is phones. I think that parents have got to get a handle on phones. So, for instance, there's filtering softwares out there like Bark. There's all kinds of. Let me tell you something. Parents in general are throwing in the towel. They're burned out. They are overwhelmed. They're stressed, and let me tell you where they're paying the price. Their parenting is what's going out the window because it's too damn hard. And you want to have problems on your hand, be a friend first. Be a friend to that child first and a parent second. You're going to have some pretty big ass problems on your hands. And I know all these new age thinkers that are like, well, I don't care. They're a free spirit. Do whatever they want. And watch your child get pregnant at 16 and watch your child end up with STDs because you have to have a handle. Those brains are underdeveloped, whether they're Mormon or not. Those brains are underdeveloped. And they're going to be curious and they're going to experiment. And they're going to get into all kinds of things.
Right.
The phone is really the phone. You've got to know what they're doing on the damn phone. You've got to be familiar with what their search history is, who they're talking to. How many kids are getting raped because parents don't even know who their children are talking to, and then they meet some stranger, some older boy or what have you, and then they get raped because of an encounter that originally happened by talking to a stranger on the internet. Parents are clueless about what's going on in the lives of their children. We had it happen to us on several occasions now where we thought we were bulletproof, and all of a sudden, like our 8-year-old daughter, she finds a loophole on the phone and she starts seeing stuff she shouldn't be seeing. And next thing you know, she's hiding things and she's sneaky and she's showing her friends things.
Yeah.
You know, get clear about that phone. Our kids they're not allowed to have their phones in their bedrooms or their bathrooms. They're not allowed to use the phone in private alone. It's pretty critical that you do this. And our kids check their phones in every night. Every night they got to turn that phone in. What that equates to is some accountability. And in my opinion, you have to have it. It's just a new day and age we live in, and we are handing them a loaded gun and telling them, whatever you do, don't push that trigger, don't pull that trigger, it'll hurt you. But we're handing them the loaded gun. Here's a loaded gun.
Yeah.
Don't shoot it. I'm just saying, like, that would be my number one piece of advice. Everything else, you know, you got to read parenting books and you got to watch things like this and you got to get involved. Like, there's so much education that can happen around parenting. You got to ask your peers and so forth. And that's been nice. We've been masterminding with Mormon parents, which has been a cool thing, like, haven't we? So that's been great.
Yeah, because because their friends are still Mormon. A lot of their friends are Mormon, and so we have come together with the parents of our kids' friends, and we're working together. And it takes a village, and I think we can still find a lot of common ground with Mormons, and we can still come together and work together in protecting our kids and teaching them morals and values that are still in alignment with the way we believed in the church as Mormons. But like Sean said, we've removed the guilt and the shame, but we still have rules and boundaries and guidelines,
morals and values and wholesomeness and moderation. Like, it's still so critical. And most Mormons, when they leave the church, it's like this initial flare up of everything about that was bad for me. So
yes,
I'm the opposite of everything they taught, which means I'm not going to parent my children. I'm going to let them see whatever the hell they want. That's dangerous territory.
I totally agree. Thank you. I think it comes down to realizing that your kids need a parent before anything else. And like Sean said, be engaged. If you're being engaged with your kids, you don't have a whole lot to be afraid of, because then when things go wrong or things are about to go wrong, you know about it. You're there for them. You can help them. And it's not like there's all this secrecy and confusion and all of that going on. And I think my my advice to any parent, really, not just ex-Mormon parents, but is just to know you don't have to have it all figured out to be a good parent. You don't have to have it all figured out. Like, it's okay to not know how to do certain things, because parenting is hard and every single kid you have is different. So when you think you got it all figured out, you have your second kid, you're back to square one, and that's okay. The first training manual that you have for your kids is actually the kid itself, because each kid has different needs, different ways of, that they need to be disciplined, or they need boundaries, and you just gotta listen, and you gotta give them what they need. So
yeah, that's awesome. I think that's where we've changed a lot, is we're more flexible. If our kids do something horrible, I mean, the Mormon in me flares up at first, truthfully.
Right.
You did what? Like, and then I have to settle down and realize, like, I did that as a teen as well, and it didn't kill me, and it didn't ruin me, and and so, I think it's just great what you're doing, putting this information out there. I think it's really, really a great service that you can offer, and I think that the openness with our children is probably. It's been a great thing to be able to talk to them about different things, instead of just, you do want to be a friend second.
Yeah,
so
that's
you want
what
to
I
be a
was
parent
gonna
first,
say. Like,
but
I
you
think
do want to be a friend.
You can
second.
find that balance, because I think I'm more of the one that wants to be the friend, and he takes on more of that role. But I do know that I need to be a parent too. But I think it's don't shame yourself as a parent for not knowing how to interact with your kids in the best way for them. And so I think it is about trial and error and experimenting with different approaches. And for me, it just feels more natural to try to be her friend, so that she feels safe and comfortable to open up with me. So that's my mentality. But Sean helps me, bring in the rules. Like, there's still got to be rules.
Balance. It's balance, right? Well, that's good, because it sounds like you guys balance each other off real well then.
Yeah, we do.
And that's good. That's good, because I think, sometimes you get too strict parents, or you get too lax, like both lax parents, and then there's not a good balance. So maybe it's a good give and take.
We always say all the time, we feel so, we feel so, I guess, a heart, how do they say, like, your heart is tugged or whatever, tugs on your heartstrings when you see a single parent. We don't know how they do it. Bless them. They're amazing. And it would be so hard, because we compliment each other a lot.
We count on each other a lot. Yeah. Like, I need certain things that he has that I am not that great at,
Yeah.
Right. Oh, man. Completely agree. Parenting is hard enough when there's two of you. I can't even imagine. So yes, great.
Sometimes we act like children too.
Our kids have to be like, you guys need to go to timeout.
Yeah. Right. You know what? That's needed sometimes.
Yeah.
Any other closing thoughts you guys have for this video?
Well, the last thing I wanted to say is I think my biggest goal for my kids when it comes to teaching them, I don't even want to teach them to believe in anything, because I don't think that that's something that you can teach. I want our kids to get to decide what they would like to believe in, if they want to believe anything. I don't even think that you have to have anything to believe in. You have different ways of seeing the world, and I think that my biggest thing for them, I would hope for them to learn from us, would be tolerance, and having such an open-minded view of the world and people and beliefs and religions, and just seeing them as more individual and not trying to search for the truth or the one and only truth. And I just don't believe that exists. And I think it's actually a much more beautiful space to be in, when you can be free to know that there is no one truth, and you just have to find what you like, and you don't have to be the missionary to get other people to believe the same way as you. Like, it is so individual. Embrace that, and also allow others. That's the whole, goes back to the whole Christ thing. Like, I just love, if people love Christ, love Christ. You know, you don't need to be that missionary and be like trying to
And you don't need to convince them not to either. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, I do like to make them aware that, you know, don't require that of me.
Yeah.
Like, don't make me believe what you believe. I don't like that.
Yeah. So I just want our kids to have that kind of view of the world and beliefs, and just be so tolerant and open-minded about everything, and discover their own truth and not get sucked into somebody else telling them what is the truth.
That's so beautiful. I just think that is a beautiful gift to give your kids, is that space to say, you know what? The world is your oyster. Like, you can believe what you want, and we're going to love you no matter what. We're going to be here for you no matter what. And we're going to respect what you believe no matter what that is. And like allowing them to use their own mind to weigh, like, if something is a good idea or not, and not put so much stock in something else. And I think that also ties into this other thought of, you know, if you don't know what to teach your kids to believe, just teach them to believe in themselves. You know, teach them that they can handle hard things, that they can creatively problem solve, that they can figure it out. And if you can teach them that, then, like, they're going to be fine. You know, they're going to be just fine.
I love that.
Yeah. Great. Well, I have loved this conversation. Thank you guys so much for coming onto my channel and talking about this with me. I know you guys are busy because you have lives and a lot of kids, and you're very engaged with them. So I know you're busy. Thank you so much for taking this time. I really know people are going to appreciate this content. Don't forget to check out Sean and Crystal's podcast, Mormon Enlightenment, as well as the Mormon Enlightenment Facebook group. I'm in there. I love seeing what people post in there. I post in there, and I feel like it's an awesome, safe place where you can really get a lot of love and support and community, which is what we all desperately need when we have left a high demand religion. And even if you're not ex-Mormon, yeah, like, it's a great place, because there's a lot of people that follow me, ex-Jehovah's Witness, ex-Scientologist. You will totally resonate with the people in that group as well. It's awesome.
So cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. And now we'll just wave goodbye. Thanks for watching. See you guys.